Well, thanks. So I actually have been with AIG for 3 years now. I run the AIG China business. And prior to rejoining AIG, in fact, I was Marshall McLennan for another 5 years. And before that, actually, with Zurich Life Insurance. And I think, Jessica, you're with Zurich right now, right?
Yeah, I
So,
am.
so I was a Zurich alumni. And then prior to joining Zurich, I was at Liberty Mutual for around 6 or 7 years. I'm an actuary by training, and I carry that very proudly. I'm a FCAS. And actually, a lot of times people are quite surprised that, when, after a conversation, we realize I'm actually, it always, surprised them. But I feel very proud to be a CAS member. And I've been a member of CAS since 2002. So it's been quite some time.
Great. No, thank you for that. Thank you for that overview. And I actually do want to drill into your career path. It's been very, very impressive. But I want to start at the very beginning.
Sure.
So I understand you studied computer science and mathematics. And I think you said in a previous interview I was looking at that you fell into the actuarial career. So tell me about how that happened.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated right before Y2K. And, it was the hardest job was to be in a computer science. So I feel like I need to have kind of a computer science as part of my toolkit and repertoire in order to get into the job market. But it was something that I do, as most Asian parents would tell you, that you have to have a hard science degree to get a job, and that was kind of the expectation. But I've always enjoyed math, and I love math. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have that, also as my, part of my backup plan, because I just, when I started in the beginning, and I thought I wanted to be, a teacher. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. That was sort of my vision. But so honestly, I did not ever wake up and say, oh, I'm going to go into insurance industry. So exciting and sexy. Right? No, it did happen. So it was actually my junior year, and I was looking for an internship. And I remember I went to this college fair looking for internship. And as I said, I didn't want to do computer science. So, I cannot see myself ever like programming 24/7, behind the desk. So at the college fair, I just went from desk to desk, and I thought, okay, let me see if I can find something in mathematics. So I went through, telling, all these employers for internship that I have a math degree, and like, no, we don't have anything. We don't have anything. And, by the time, I'm heading towards my last table at a college fair, and I thought, well, history tells me that every time I say I have a math degree, I'm probably not going to get a job. There's nothing. So I have one opportunity now. There's one table left. I better say that I have a computer science degree because I need an internship. So that table happened to be Liberty Mutual, right? So how ironic. So I went in and I said, hey, I got a computer science degree. Everybody is hiring computer science major. I'm sure you have a job for me. It's like, no, we're not hiring computer science. I'm like, seriously? Okay. How about math degree? I'm like, yes. I'm like, really? Yeah, we're looking for, actuarial student. I'm like, I'm sorry, what is that word that you just say, actuarial student, right? Like, and they say, oh, like, being actuary. I'm like, how do you spell that? I've never heard of it, right? So I had to go back and look it up, about actuaries in general, what it means. But yeah, so I was very, very fortunate, and that's how I really, fall into the actual degree, fall into the, the actual, profession. I did my, the half, during the summer, I did my internship, and I just love, what I was doing. My manager was great every day. He really, at the time, my manager really spent time, educating me about being an actuary, and the work that I was doing, it was like 1 to 2 hours of like training, right? Just about actuarial work. And I learned a lot, and people was great. The company, Liberty, really focused a lot on the actuarial career. And I thought, I think that was like the biggest draw for me. So when I graduated, Liberty, wanted to bring me back. And in fact, I also looked for other opportunity. I got offers also from other life insurance company paying me more with sign-on bonus, moving to, to Connecticut and other places. But, my ultimate decision was that I wanted to be with a company that values talent and wanted to invest in talent. And doing my summer internship, and Liberty kind of speak to that, and kind of represent that for me. So even despite with less money and lower offer, I went with Liberty. And so that's how I started with my actual career and end up at Liberty Mutual. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay. The fate intervenes.
yes.
It must have been it must have been an awesome summer internship. What did they have you doing, and what did you do initially when you first joined?
Yeah, so I think it was a combination. I mean, it was looking back, it's probably not that exciting, but everything was new, right? So for me, it was about learning. I was, supporting the personal lines business for the southern part of the U.S. And so I have this, southern U.S. being carved out, and running triangles, writing programs, SAS programs, and just downloading and making sure that the data is correct, checking against the previous period. It's exciting, not really, right? But I learned a lot about Excel. I learned a lot about the fundamentals of of being an actuarial professional, being in that field, right? Making sure you have the right data, check reasonability, make sure that the patterns make sense, right? So, you got to make sure that, there's no, if it's garbage in, it's going to be garbage out. Like, these are really fundamental stuff. And so, so even for in that short period of, a few months of internship, I learned a lot. And as I said, right, a big part of it was that the company was also, really had a great training program that put in place that, allow me to learn a lot of technical skill, but then at the same time applying, with work. So that to me was the biggest thing. I wanted a job that I could learn and grow. So, and it really fits the bill for me at that time.
Got it. So a fantastic start to the career. And you were there for, I think, 6 years before you ended
Yes.
up moving to Asia. What made
Yeah.
you move?
Yeah. So that, again, is an accident, right? Life has never worked out the way you planned. So my husband at the time, the company moved him, from Boston to Hong Kong, and I still have my I still have my last exam to go. So I said to him, I said, well, why don't you go first? I figure out if you like Hong Kong. I never work in Asia because I left China when I was almost 16. So I really don't know what the work culture is going to be like, and I've been away even at that time already for 12, 13 years, and China has developed and prospered a lot. So, and then Hong Kong too, right? So I didn't really know what to expect, in Asia. What is the work culture like, for example? So, so there's a bit of a reluctance on my part. So I thought, okay, well, you go first and figure out, what is it like. But I wanted to focus on getting my fellowship. So that's what I did. So I stayed back for another 6 months to complete my last fellowship exam, and I got my fellowship. And then I decided after that, okay, things seems to be going well, and let me go check out what Asia. So then in the summer of that year, I came out to Asia to kind of do a tour in Hong Kong and actually meet a couple of employers as part of that trip, and also met with Liberty too. And interestingly, after that trip, I actually got an offer from Liberty to be their regional actuary in this part of the world. But then at the same time, I also got an offer from AIG. And that was a real struggle, because then I thought, well, new place, like going back to a brand new place I never worked before, work with a brand new company that I don't have any network or political capital. Would I be able to successful? Who do I go for help? It's just, it just, and then the moving itself, right, it was hard. So I thought, well, you know what, I should minimize the risk. Maybe I don't want all my life every aspect of my life to change. So I actually did not accept. I actually turned down the AIG offer and was about to accept the Liberty offer. But before I have the chance to accept the Liberty offer, AIG was amazing. Like the president of the, the president of global A&H head actually wrote to me, right? And I still have that letter with me, and I'm sure one day I will frame it. But I think was one of the most powerful message that I received from at that time a very, very senior person with an AIG. And he basically says that, Lisa, I never write to any candidate that turned down AIG, right? And and the reason I'm doing that is because I think you got great potential and you're making a mistake. And if you join us, we're operating at at the time was 170, 80 countries globally, and this is where your full potential could be realized. And I was 26, 27, and I just thought, you know what? I think I'm young. I could afford to be bold and take a calculated risk, right? What could go wrong, right? If, AIG anyway, it's a great premier brand. Let me give it a try, and I'll do something new, because I actually came out, I was doing at Liberty, I have exposure to personal lines, home and auto, and then also workers' compensation, different markets, business, national market, or whatever, and different function, right? Did underwriting research, I did pricing, actuarial, and reserving, and I thought, let me do something new. And so this takes me to the A&H business, brand new in this part of the world. It was just booming at the time, and with a brand new company. And so, but it was AIG, right? Such a premier brand. So I said, what, I'm going to take that risk. And it was a bit scary, right? New company, don't know anybody, working in Asia and living here. But it just, really, I think is, again, one of the best career decisions I've made, because the company, once I get here, I realize how much, how exciting it is that, for this part of the world, and, all the peers and the company and my managers and everybody, which is fantastic. They're all very experienced, very professional. And again, it's a company that actually invests a lot in talent. And again, with it, I often joke about, I was with AIG for 5 years, and it felt like 15 years, right? The company really throw you in the deep end of the water. You really have to learn to swim or sink, right? And you learn very quickly, but everybody was just so helpful, and they want to see you successful. So that I really, that's how I ended up with, in Asia and with AIG in the first place. Yeah. And that's been, almost how many years ago? 17 years ago now, yeah.
How did you find the culture? I know you were initially perhaps apprehensive. What did you find when you got to Hong Kong?
Yeah, so I think, Hong Kong or Asia just in general, right? I mean, the population is different, the mix is different. And so, I think the work culture, compared to the West or America is very different. In general, you're going to find that, Asian or Chinese people, the way, they work, they behave, and they're extremely professional, very, very, people work very hard, right? But oftentimes, we are not the most outspoken person, right? So you go to a meeting, a lot of times people are not comfortable being, because it's like more of a consensus-based culture. So if you really want to know what people are thinking about, right? A lot of conversation actually take place after the meeting. You get, but you've got to build a personal relationship with folks, and people understand and trust you, then they'll tell you how they really think. And so, and this is, so in the context of Asia, right, when you think about diversity and inclusion, diversity has so many different dimensions, but inclusion also allows you want to include people. In fact, is about, as a leader or manager, you got to modify your behavior in order to solicit those inclusive comments, right? If you are really interested in the true point of view of different perspective from the colleagues that could bring in. Yeah, so culturally, I thought that was quite different, and you got to shift. And working in this context, I really have to shift my behavior, and also be hyper aware of this is the environment that I'm working with, the direct brute force of telling you in the face and be so straightforward doesn't quite work. In Asia, I would say that we had to be much more artful in how we approach. Yeah.
Got it. And you seem to have adapted very well then.
Well, I think it's relatively easy because for me, I grew up in China, right? So there's a big part of me already understand the culture, and I know how Chinese people think, and only when a big part of my life, right, that my formative years was in China. So by the time where when I went to U.S., as I said, I was almost 16, and so I think I adapt pretty well. I understand the Western thinking and the American way of of thinking and expression and behavior, but it is kind of I really don't find myself quite a good hybrid model, if you would, of Asian Chinese, and really know I could turn around and connect with the Chinese and Asians pretty well, and then also understand how the Western and Americans, especially working in an American context, how you need to communicate, much more direct, right? So
Got it.
yeah, so but it so far worked well for me.
Yes, I can see that. And how about the culture just around women in the workplace? Is it just similar to the US, or is it a little bit different?
Yeah, so I would say Asia is this vast, a geography, right? So you can't really just paint it in one stroke, and that's why I said, like, even every country within Asia, how you determine diversity, there's a different dimension of it, right? So if you look at, China, for example, the country is 99% Chinese, right? So it's very, very homogeneous. So when you talk about, well, we want racial diversity, well, there's not much to start with, right? So it's a different dimension. So it could be, it's about gender, it's about age, about work style, even how what's people's experience and how they bring to the workplace. And similarly, it could be said about Hong Kong and Singapore, Thailand, and other places. So so I think, firstly, it's important that to differentiate by country rather than paint one stroke. When I first came out to Asia, I would say, and not at all surprising, because, this is, still, I mean, remember, I'm looking at this from an insurance industry perspective, right? So, insurance in the US, in the West versus insurance, for Asia, I would say, yeah, we represent quite a traditional, right, industry, meaning that there's not a lot of gender diversity to begin with, and it's not an AIG issue or a Zurich issue or Liberty issue. But if I look at Asia across, most of the CEOs of any insurance company at the top, the CEOs are male, right, to start with. And even at that time, so we're talking about, this is 20 years ago, even at that time, all the AIG CEO was male, pale, and stale. So
Awesome.
yeah, they're all like mid-age white male, right? So middle-aged white
Even in
male. So that
Asia.
was the situation. Even in Asia, yeah, and it's not AIG issue; it's across the industry, right? So that's just what you see. Because I think, partly that, the insurance industry is a relatively new in this part of the world anyway. So where are you going to import knowledge? Obviously, is going to be all these foreign companies going to bring people, right, expats from, their home country or home office and implant it here. So that's, I think that's the broader historic context. So that's, again, so I want to stress that it's not a particular company issue, is more of an industry issue. So that's what what I saw across the board. And I would say at that time, it doesn't matter how ambitious I was, I just never think that I would ever make it as a woman to the top, right, of to the CEO role. So needless to say, a lot the world really has progressed, and the industry has making a lot of progress. So for me to rejoin and come back to AIG 3 years ago and take on the CEO role of AIG China, and that just that's amazing, and actually makes quite a bit of news in the market, because, and plus I was pregnant, of course, but just being a female and being pregnant, I think that when I take on that role, it speaks to the market. It speaks to our colleagues that actually the company has changed, right? The AIG today is definitely not the AIG that I know 20 years ago, especially, when it comes to the company culture, how we embrace diversity, inclusion. And you could see definitely a lot of push towards driving a more equitable, more, inclusive and diverse culture and workplace. So I'm very proud of the direction that the industry is moving. I definitely am very, very proud of, all the decisions and the direction that, AIG is has really made, and the big progress, obviously, because I'm here too, all right? So, yeah.
So, yeah, thanks for bringing up the latest job that you have, the one you're in now, 3 years ago, taking the helm of AIG in China while you were pregnant. So, tell me about that decision making and making a switch to a job like that at such a time.
Yeah, again, right? Trust me, I did not plan to change job and have and get pregnant at the same time. And and my second child was pretty much an accident. Honestly, I did not expect to have my second child because the age gap between my two sons is 11 years old. So I think any woman in the right mind would would not be thinking, oh, I'm going to wait for 11 years to have another child, right? It's really, it gets harder when you get older and try to look after young kids. You just don't have the kind of energy. So take it from me. So it was not planned at all, right? So but when I was talking to AIG about taking on a role for AIG China, and that was really exciting because I've always felt because prior to this job I was at Marsh McLennan, right? So I in early days when, and I'm sure that a lot of young folks feels this way, right? I went to property casualty and become an actuary, but then I always wonder, right? Well, I wonder what is life insurance like, right? So then I went to Zurich Life, and then I come and I thought, oh, actually, you know what? I think property casualty is better. And then
Good to know.
Right? So, well, we are talking about CAS, right?
Yes.
And then I went into consulting. So that was really interesting, and I learned a lot as well. And so then I felt that that is still, I think maybe just being an actuary and being the front line and having started my career as in the carriers, I just felt that being an insurance company and really dealing with the client, I think that's much more interesting. I think being a broker is you're one step removed to see your impact, right? At the end of the day, the insurance, the claims, everything is being executed by the the carrier, by the insurance company. So anyway, I just felt like there's a lot more to the insurance industry than consulting, and then especially you also have the customer service and the claims, the operational component. I thought that was quite interesting. Anyway, so that's when I thought, okay, I've seen life now. I was curious. I've seen consulting now. That was interesting. But I'm ready to go home, if you would, right? I want to go back to casualty, general insurance. I came from China. I have an opportunity to go back to China. Why not, right? So, and then also being a Chinese. And so anyway, yeah. So that was my sort of a primary consideration when I think about it. And also, so going home to AIG as well. I've been with the company before, now I'm going back and had great fond memories of the company, right? So going home to China, going home to AIG, going home to insurance. So that's how I end up there. And so I was really excited. And then after I accepted the offer, a few weeks later, I found out that, oops, I'm pregnant. Now what, right? So yes, it does. I was thinking like, okay, now do I want to do that? Like, okay, now I have to move to China. Now I'm going to move and have a baby. Now it's a new job. Like, okay, how could things get any more complicated, right? But you got to roll with the punches. And, I did that in my early part of my career. I take some bold decisions, and so I think I could do it, right? But I also at the same time at the decision point, I also actually I was very open with the company. To be honest, I did say that, well, when you hire me, I wasn't pregnant. You didn't know I was pregnant, and I didn't know either, right? So, but now I am. And if the company decided to make a different decision, I say I understand. So I wanted to put that option. I don't expect the company to make a different decision, but I think I wanted just to be fair, right, to my future employer too. So I did say that, okay, if you want to make a different decision, because now you have the latest information about me being pregnant, right? So I understand. But it was amazing. Like, the company come back to me, the time my manager says to me that, no, of course not, right? We hire you back to AIG because we expect you to build a long career with the company. And so it's not, we just have to focus on, during the period when you're on maternity leave, how we're going to transition, just making sure that during that period, we got a good transition plan. We got good people that could continue to drive the business while you're on leave, and you could continue to stay informed, and that's fine. So I was really, really impressed with the AIG's response. So, and it was, again, right, it speaks to the culture, the new culture that I'm experiencing. And so it was very touching also for me at that moment. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And it all worked out then? It was smooth sailing?
Yes. Yeah, so no, absolutely. AIG is a different company, but as I said, right, with my onboarding experience, it's just as I expected, right? So the company is going through a lot of transformation. We got strong leadership, and as you interview Brian Dupo, right, and also Peter Zaffino coming in, and so with their coming into the organization, we make massive transformation. We focus on our going back to the basics of underwriting excellence. We're transforming our operation, and also, AIG 200, you probably heard about it as well. So, the massive amount of transformational work is being done, but it's a really exciting place to be. I mean, my memory of AIG from 20 years ago was AIG was at the top of at the peak performance, and really is the beacon of the industry. And then you got a crisis, and then global financial crisis. It's just we had a very tough time. I would say AIG went through probably 10 years of a tough time, 10 years as CEO, until Brian and Peter came through. That joined the company, and now we are really on track. We know the strategic direction that the company is moving, and everybody's pulling in the same direction. And plus, the company culture is, it's really, moving and becoming much more progressive and more inclusive. It is a great place to be. So I'm speaking as an employer and also as a company ambassador, obviously. But I'm really, I speak this about my feeling, really from the bottom of my heart. So that's why I'm still here, and that's the reason why I come back.
That's great. And I read when you took the helm of AIG in China, you did talk a lot about driving change. So tell me about that change. Tell me more about that change that you're looking to drive and how that's been going.
Yeah, sure. So I would say, it's going well to start. And when I said about driving change, actually, there's two perspectives I'm looking at. One is, from the market, I think there's a huge opportunity, and the market is growing, right? So if you look at in the last 10 years, where you actually see significant double-digit growth on the insurance industry, China, right, is the place to be. And very, very dynamic. There's a lot of digitalization in China happening, as you know. So, you've talked about innovation, digitalization, exciting and dynamic market that I think that we have to participate, and that's where the opportunity really lies. And the other aspect that when I say about driving change is, I saw what AIG could be. And the size of the business, we were, when I first came out to Asia, we were growing A&H. We were like one of the big A&H writers, like in the market in every country. We are the most innovative, blah blah blah, right? But I think with the company kind of lost the edge and got distracted in the 10 years of post-crisis, right? So there's just so many different directions, and the company have to find its way. And so when I came back, I realized that China, the AIG China business was not, was probably more stagnant at that time. So I wanted to kind of, move the AIG China business to a next level, to a more exciting, a growth platform, but really modernize our business. So we've done great on the commercial, but we really kind of step away from the consumer a little bit. But I think consumer is the best place to be in terms of if you're looking for profitable growth. In China, you got the population. You got a population size. You got the aging population. You got the increase income in disposable income increase. You got the people are becoming much more aware of their healthcare, health management, about advanced medical treatments, all that, right? So everything is pointing to health. Everything is pointing to consumer space, and we need to play much bigger. And so that is the kind of, broadly, one of the changes I wanted to drive for AIG China is that, be more significant in our consumer participation, consumer business participation. We want to diversify our distribution channel, but find ways for us to grow in a sort of a more efficient and more scalable. Right, because foreign companies, just so you know a little bit about China, foreign company overall, all the general insurance foreign company, including Zurich in China, right? All of us together, we're less than 2% of the market, less than 2%, right? About 1.9, and so being a very small, segment, the foreign company in China, 98% of it is dominated by local, and it's highly, highly competitive. So as a foreign company operating in China, you really need to find your niche, right? So because it's so competitive. So what is your right to win? And what's your key differentiation, and who are the target customer that will buy in and recognize your product and your service, right? And your international network, for example. So you have to find those niche, and that's and play to your strength. That's the only way I would say for foreign companies in China to be able to grow and grow profitably. Yeah. So broadly, that is kind of the vision that we have for AIG China, diversifying our channel, diversifying, our portfolio, and really, make it more meaningful on the consumer space. Yeah, and then also through that process, digitalization, right? You can't now, these days you can't really touch the customer, even commercial, right? Also, right? We're looking for digitalization, but even more so on the consumer side. So the whole digital transformation and how we modernize not just our internal processes, but also how we reach the customer is going to be absolutely key for us. So very exciting times.
Hearing you talk, and obviously, your career and your current role, clearly you are an excellent strategic thinker. Obviously, know a ton about the business. So I want to segue now into any career advice you might have for other actuaries, perhaps who are earlier in their career, and how to sort of maybe chart their way to a senior leadership role like you have.
Yeah. Very good question, Jessica. I would say that, the advice I have for general public, right, for generally, and I mentor many young folks as well, and young women or younger generation. Just the general advice, I personally go by 3 Ps, right? Be passionate about what you do. You got to love what you do in order to do it well. And always be professional, right? So when you're in a workplace, it get challenged, and there's a lot of pressure sometimes. So, it's very dangerous. It's, always good for you to know who you are and what are your weakness and strengths, because under pressure, a person could revert to type, and you need to understand where these pressure points are and what's your potential weakness. So you be aware and you could address it. And at the end of the day, that's important because you want to always know how to behave and be very professional, right? And the last P is about perseverance, right? Is always going to be challenged. Doesn't matter what you do. You could, it's, and think about, and I'm sure that all the actuarial students, the actuaries, right, that are in this profession knows, right? Perseverance. You got to get to the end, right? Finishing that, you got to be committed, right? So that would apply. Now, specifically about actuaries, I would say you got to know your basics. You have to start off being a good actuary, know your technical stuff, right? So do that. And then the second point is, make sure you know how to connect the dots, right? Take what you learn, on your books or these papers, right? Thousands of papers, actual studies, thousands of hours. And how do you take those learnings and translate that into work, right? So that's the second part, to connect the dots. And then lastly, it's very important, you got to know your business, right? And I always feel, and people ask me, how does it feel like being a CEO and being an actuary at the same time? Like in my experience, I say, being an actuary makes me a better CEO, right? And if I ever go back and become a product person, that's okay. I would say then my general management experience will make me a better actuary, right? And so, I would say that for the actuaries and, that are currently still in the actuarial field, and you think that you may be only doing technical work, that is a wrong way to think about it, right? You're not just doing a technical work. You got to know the business that you're in. So know your data in order to drive proper insight, in order to advise the business to make informed business decision and take calculated risk. That is ultimately what we do, right, for the business. And so you have to know that. Now, if you ever decided, to come out of the actuarial box, right, and say, I want to go into more general management, then that's great. And the other thing is that, we've got to work on our leadership and communication, right, just in general, right? You can always, you don't have to lead a big team to consider yourself a leader. Lead yourself, lead a small team that you have. And so that leadership skill is so critical and is so transformable, right? It doesn't matter which job you're in, which company that you're in. Companies are always looking for great leaders, and because great leaders gets people excited, inspire them, and gets people engaged, and happy employee have higher productivity and happier customer. That's ultimate, for any CEO, any company, that's what they want to drive, right? Is a better customer experience too. So, make sure that you have, good, happy employees, and how, and that's the role of the leader, right? So, yeah, so those are my, few pointers. If you wanted to stay in actuary or stay in actuarial field, or you want to just be, more of on the general management side, yeah.
The trick is, though, how does someone gain those skills? So, like, for example, leadership skills. And if you could maybe rewind back to pre-leadership days, Lisa, did you very purposefully build your leadership and communication skills? Did you have very specific training, or was it more just on the job and focusing?
Yeah, so I think actually, Jessica, very good question, but actually the answer is both, right?
Okay.
So yeah, because if you want to develop a certain area, you have to be deliberate, right? And you got to know where is your weakness, and where, what are the areas that you want to develop, and you got to put an effort in there. So when you put that effort in, it's very targeted, right? So you have to be deliberate. Then you think about, okay, well, I want to learn. This is my gap, and this is where I wanted to get better. Where would I get these, get resources to support me? And obviously, a lot of companies has leadership trainings, but there's more, right? You're on the job observing people that inspire you, observing leaders and how they behave, right? And think about that, how you could take these kind of learnings into your own personal development. And I think learning is a constant, right? You could, it doesn't matter how old you are, you could still learn. And I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I still, but I know the areas that where I could do better, right? And so you just need to be aware of that. You could have mentors, you could have sponsors, right, to help you. And there's tons of leadership books out there, but you could read them, but you got to pick few things that really practice, right? Really practice how you're going to get better in some of the areas that you identify that that you need help. Yeah.
Got it. No, thank you for those tips. So again, then just really focusing and having that deliberate practice. I think that makes a ton of sense. So thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I do want to talk a little bit about your thoughts on the actuarial profession as well. And you've mentioned, in your tips for future actuaries, but you talk about digitalization. I mean, obviously the industry is changing. We have access to lots of different types of data. How do you see the profession having evolved given all these changes in the industry?
Yeah, very interesting. When I think back about, my earlier actuarial years, right? Writing programs, downloading data in Excel, trying to clean the data, make checking. Looking back, I just think that, and over time, with, as I progress and other people, the more junior folks are doing that and how they're doing it. And I just think that, honestly, like 80% of that stuff that I used to do is gone, right? It's replaced by machines and programs and tools that we have today. And so I really feel that, the actual, career it's really shifting, like job and our roles and responsibility will shift, right? So, data and analytical side is only part of it. I think company is going to look more and more into, how much the actuary really know about business and understanding what are the business changes, because historical data doesn't always represent the future, right? So you really need to understand, what is the environment, what are the changes that's happening, and what's your business, and how then take the patterns that you see or the data analysis that you have based on historic data and try to project what's the future. And I think that's really, really important. So, the actual career, I think over time is going to call for, much more understanding on the business, more of a commercial business acumen and commercial acumen, because the right answer is always about, striking the balance, right, of the, the answer is not always so easy, right? So you want to increase, for example, if you wanted to increase the market share, but then you have to strike the balance, maybe you need to reduce your rate, but then it's going to impact your profitability. Okay, well, where's the right answer, right? So these are just a very simple example, but you got to really know your business. And at the end of the day, package the insight that you derive from the data and then present that in a way that people understand, right? I think there's too many actuaries that, we're kind of talking to ourselves because we're kind of assuming that the other person also an actuary is also technical. How do you take the data and transfer it into a story to be able to tell the senior management, say, okay, here is here's the insight that we draw from the data, and this is pointing us to this kind of business decision, and these are the risks that you should expect, and always have that mindset. Okay, if this doesn't work, then here are other options, right, that you could consider. So being much more collaborative, have a great, influencing and communication skill, but also understand the business is going to be absolutely key. So I think, of course, there's always going to be a room for people who are, highly technical, just want to do, work on spreadsheets all day long, right? That's fine. But I think increasingly you're going to see that the business is going to demand actuaries with much higher EQ just in general.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It was interesting when you reflected back on your first job and thinking 80% of that is covered by machines now. I feel completely the same way, right? If I think back to what I used to do, I started off in consulting, I created macros to print exhibits.
Exactly.
I created tools to make triangles out of raw data, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so, yeah, honestly, with my hat on now, being president of the CAS, I'm like, we've grown for 5% a year for like decades. What do all these people do? Like those entry-level jobs are obsolete, and you're right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is still a bit of a mystery for me. I want to get your take on some interesting statistics on the CAS. So we actually have a really large proportion of our memberships who are Asian. So 23% of our members are Asian, much higher than the general US population, which is huge. And more interesting than that, I found, surprising at least, is that, about a third of our population is female overall. But if you look at the Asian population, around half of them are female of the CAS. So I'm like, there's something about Asian women that make us very drawn to this profession, evidently, and able to succeed at becoming members. And any thoughts there as a fellow Asian woman?
Yeah, interesting. Just trying to think about the gender diversity, even in my team in China and in China in particular, right? So China as a market, actually, I would say the gender equity and gender diversity actually is pretty well represented, right? So females, my leadership team is 50-50, and broadly, I would say in other companies, female also have quite a large relative to the European and America in terms of representation. So I would say that's kind of less an issue for us. But it's very interesting that you talk about, female Asians. What could it be? I mean, I wonder, I think one thing that maybe to look at is look at this, that you have the data. I think it will be interesting. I would first look at what's the average age of the female Asians. The female Asians. And my theory maybe, I don't know, I could be wrong. I mean, we all grew up in the tiger families, right? So there's a lot of expectation. We all have to work hard. And I think, Asians in general push, through these exams pretty quickly. That's my theory, but you could look at the data to see if that's true, right?
Yeah.
And so if you could go through that exam process faster, then you could start a family, right? Because once you start a family, it does delay the process and the desire to actually continue to pursue. So that's, I always already, I become a fairy years before I start, I have my first child, right? But I could tell you, if I wasn't pushing so quickly, very deliberate, pushing my exam so quickly, and then I have my first child, it's probably going to delay another 5 years or even 10 years. I mean, I remember some of my colleagues, from the old days that, become a fellow only after, 10 or 15 years after I become a fellow, right? And a lot of them started their family early. And it's hard trying to balance work and find time to study and invest in yourself and look after your kid, right? And especially being the mother, right? The career woman is very challenging. So I think if you look at the age, I think it might be quite telltale sign. I mean, it will tell, maybe there's some story there, but I don't know for sure, to be honest. That's my theory.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to look into. Thank you for sharing your hypothesis.
Yeah, that's my hypothesis. I would, be interested once you look into it, and then we could discuss and say, hey, what happened, right? So, yeah, but I'm actually surprised. I thought that, FCAS actually may have more females than 1/3. So female representation is still quite, it's still considered a minority, actually. Interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So it has been growing very slowly over time. Yeah. But still a minority.
Yeah, and I think it's because the rigor, right, the exam process required, and then you are, if you're still taking exams and your body clock is ticking, I think a lot of women probably kind of have to make a decision on what you decided to do. I don't know. I mean, for a lot of want to be moms, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and that is actually probably worth looking into, right? Why do people drop out? Is it because of that? And it takes such a long time. Yeah, agree.
Yeah, exactly. And you could probably look at the dropout, where they drop out and the age that they're in, right? So if they're dropping out at the early 20s, then my theory falls apart. But if they're dropping out at, like 30 or early 30s, and that's where a lot of times, we have to make a decision, right? Do I continue or not continue? I want to start a family. Do I do it now? Because it is going to, the family commitment is quite extraordinary, right? It's a heavy burden on a lot of women, so a lot of mothers. So anyway, we need the guys to step up. And,
yes.
and to take take more family responsibility, right? So women could participate more in the workforce, could invest in ourselves, and then you could hopefully you'll see that the more gender balance over time. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. This has been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you, Jessica.
You have had such an interesting career and an approach to your career and your life as well. So thank you so much for sharing.
No, thank you, Jessica. Really, thank you so much for the time, and I really enjoy our conversation.